Hi, and welcome back. So after learning about functions, I think it's important to just jump right into what's known as optionals in Swift. And these are rather confusing for people because it seems that early on, students are not given a very clear explanation of what optionals are, and they kind of just learn as they go with optionals, which I think is a big mistake. I think you really need to get a solid understanding of what optionals are as early as possible in your education of Swift and iOS. So I did start a new playground here. I've called it optionals, and we can get started. This lecture is more comment heavy. I'm just going to go ahead and paste in this first comment so we can discuss that. So optionals, it's a feature which allows the handling of an absence of a value. Optionals say that there's either a value here and it equals this, x, or there isn't a value here at all. All right, so a key to understanding optionals is to realize too that there is a difference between 0 and nothing, right? 0 is a value, nothing is just nothing. So that's what optionals help us figure out. Is there something here, or is there nothing here? And if there is something here, what is that value? And if there's something here, let's use it, or can we use it? Okay, so we use optionals in cases where we want to include a variable that we don't want to give a value to right now. Maybe in the future we'll assign it a value, maybe not, but that's what they're for, and that's why they're so great. The thing that makes optionals so awesome is that without them, crashes in your app can really easily occur, and they will occur while the user is using the app. And it is definitely something you do not want to happen, because that means they'll automatically dislike your app and hate it and talk nasty things about it. So whenever possible and useful, we can use optionals instead to avoid errors that will crash the app. So let me show you first how to declare a simple optional. Let's call var, let's go back to my favorite food, and a colon. So just as you're used to, currently this is all old news to you. A variable name, explicitly declared as a string, and now just a question mark. Right there, you've just created your first optional. The question mark here tells the compiler that my favorite food is an optional. It might exist, it might not. You'll notice the compiler is saying nil right here. That means nothing as compared to 0. Nil means nothing. So right now it's saying there's nothing here, but perhaps there will be in the future. So let's just keep it available. So as you see, if you actually print the my favorite food variable, it comes up as nil right now, but we can change that. Okay, next I'm going to show you a line of code that would probably go ignored in other computer languages, which would later down the road cause errors and crashes, and actually could be really challenging to find within your code too. So you might be lost saying, where's my mistake here? But not in Swift. Swift is a very safe language, and it won't compile, so it's impossible to release if it finds an error like this. So let's just paste that in. So let's say var sentence equals my favorite food is plus the my favorite food optional, and you see we get an error. So let's go ahead and check that out. Now here it's saying value of optional is not unwrapped. Did you mean to use exclamation point or question mark? Just want to comment that first line on so you can keep it and review it later. Now let's duplicate that line. So var sentence, my favorite food is my favorite food. And it's telling us, did you mean to use the exclamation point? So if we add the exclamation point, the error disappears. Now the exclamation point, what it's doing is called unwrapping the optional. So when you have an exclamation point, you're what's called force unwrapping the optional. And what that means is you're telling the compiler that yes, I'm absolutely certain, I'm positive that the my favorite food variable contains a value. And because you're absolutely positive, it can use it. However, right now, it actually does not contain a value. It's only defined. We know that there's no value in my favorite food, yet we're telling the compiler that there is a value in my favorite food. So this can potentially cause a crash later in your app. So let's comment that out. And instead of doing that, here is a very safe way to check if there is a value stored in the my favorite food variable. If there is one, Swift will continue and do what you want to do. And if there's not one, it will simply ignore the request and bypass it, and therefore there's zero chance of an error occurring. And in order to do that, you would do the following. If let, and you can rename whatever you want, but I'm going to say my fav food value equals my favorite food. So you're just basically declaring something new and saying, is there a value in the my favorite food variable? And if there is, let's assign it to this new variable name. So then you could say, if there is a value there, print there is a value here. It is, and it will be the my favorite food value. Else, print there is no value here. So once again, this is a safe way to check to see if there is a value in an optional variable or constant. And if there is a value there, we can then use it. If not, Swift will just walk right past it and say, no problem, there's no value here in this optional. Let's continue with the execution of the app. So as you can see currently, there is no value here, and that makes sense because we never did give it a value. So let's do that now. So now if you added in a line to change the variable, or to add actual value to the variable is the better way to say it, which I just did. My favorite food equals tacos. So now it's checking the optional. My favorite food still is an optional. And it's saying, okay, there is something there, so let's continue on and execute the code, which it does. There is a value here. It is an optional with a value tacos. Okay, that is the most bare bones and basic description of optionals that I can provide, but I believe that makes total sense to you, and we'll use optionals again in the future so you'll get more practice with them. So that wraps up optionals. In the next lecture, we're going to look at enumerations, which is a very cool little tool that you'll definitely use in the future as well. So I'll see you in the next lecture.